Here's another picture of the impacts of it. It does look really horrible. Yeah, again, the scale of it, you can't really understand the scale of that picture is enormous. And so these huge lakes up here, they're vast artificial lakes with basically poisonous water that are created from the industry, and that's being produced on an enormous scale, and no one really has any idea how they're going to get rid of them at the moment. They're just popping up all over the place.
And leaking into all sorts of roads.
Yeah, but they're very, very big roads. Okay. So this little orange dot here is one of those massive house-sized diggers.
Right.
So yeah, it's really, really quite vast. Yeah, well, let's leave tar sands for now because Sue's going to be talking about them more. So this other one, underground coal gasification, is one of the other ones that they're starting to, or talking about starting to do in the UK. The ones to think about in the UK are shale gas and shale oil, coal bed methane, and underground coal gasification. Basically what this involves is you set light to the coal seam underground, then you control the amount of air flowing to it, and then you extract the gas that comes from that, and you can use that as a fuel. And it's a really, really bad idea, but it obviously economically makes sense to do it. So this is a diagram of it. You drill down into one bit, set light to it, suck the gas up the other end. So yeah, again, this is a problem, by the way, of all unconventional fossil fuels, is they use a very large amount of water. And it's again, even without moving into unconventional fossil fuels, we're rapidly becoming more and more water scarce around the world. So this is another example of where it's not an isolated problem, it's something that's in a context where they it's already in a bad state and it's going to make it much worse. Yeah, and the other big problem with this is groundwater contamination. So it has been done experimentally in lots of places around the world. It's never been done on a commercial basis, but the experiments they've had with it have had lots of disastrous benzene poisoning in the water, for example.
Chris, can I just on the figures given for CO2 emissions, when you combust it underground, all the figures given for that part of the process, as well as when it reaches the surface and is used by the public or by industry?
Yeah, there are ways of looking at the technology where you include that. And one of the interesting things about this is a massive amount of the energy in the coal is just wasted because you're setting light to it underground. It just heats up all the ground around it. So in terms of like efficient use of the coal, it's actually incredibly inefficient. And again, so they try and say, well, we're going to use carbon capture storage and it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Whereas actually, there's even some research that specifically says that these exhausted coal seams are unsuitable for keeping carbon dioxide in. It's all a load of nonsense. The carbon capture storage thing, all of it is just a big way of trying to say, well, we can just deal with the problem with this little techno fix, and you can't. So the other really big thing about underground coal gasification is it allows you to access a vast amount of coal, like way more than we can get with normal mining. And as I was trying to demonstrate earlier, we can't afford to move into that as an extra resource. So this is a lovely burning coal seam. This is in a place called Centralia in the United States, where they accidentally set light to a coal seam in the 1950s, and it's still burning now. There's no way of putting it out. And this is actually a bit closer to the surface, and they say, well, this is never going to happen because it's going to be way underground and won't get the same amount of oxygen. But if you've got something like a mine shaft that someone's forgotten about, or a fissure in the ground, there's a source of air to it, then you can get these uncontrolled burns as well, and they can go on for centuries sometimes. There's lots of them in China, for example, at the moment, that are burning uncontrollably. And obviously that's pretty bad for the environment, and you don't get any energy out of it. So yeah, underground coal gasification is one of the really more extreme. I know they all sound extreme, but it's even more extreme. And it's also one where the UK might be the first place in the world to have a commercial industry in it. They've got plans to develop it in a few places. They were going to do it in Warwickshire, but that looks like it's fallen through. They were going to do it in Swansea, that looks like it's going to fall through. But they've sold licenses to do it all around the coast. So what they're talking about doing mainly at the moment is doing it under the sea first, and that's mainly a way just to avoid local opposition to it. But it also presents us with a real opportunity. If we can stop it in this country, we might even be able to stop it happening around the world. So that's really, really significant. So this one is oil, shale. I just might have to go through the rest of them a little bit quicker because we're spending quite a lot of time on it.
I think we could wrap it up on 2, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, it should be fine. So oil shale, it's not really being extracted that much at the moment, but there's a massive amount of it out there, and they're kind of looking into ways to extract it at the moment. It's a very inefficient, it's one of the most inefficient actually, you know, that energy cliff diagram, it was the one that was right down the bottom. And yeah, the same sorts of problems with water pollution. They've started doing a few test projects for how to extract it in, basically you extract it by heating up the entire reserve underground. It slowly liquefies over a process of years, and then you can pump it out, which obviously requires a huge amount of energy, and also involves, you know, seeping out into the environment around it. So one way around that they tried to do is to literally freeze the ground around the deposit, then melt the stuff in the middle, and then extract the oil out. It didn't work out that well, unsurprisingly. But it is one to worry about because there's a huge amount of it. Particularly, there's one deposit in the States which has got a vast amount of it, and there's other countries like in the Middle East that are also looking to develop it, partly because they want to protect their energy security. Shale oil, right, we'll just do this one very quickly. So this is the same type of rock as shale gas, and all it means is you're just getting oil out of it instead of gas. And that's also one that's in the UK. So in Balkan, in fact, it was, it's actually a form of tight oil, which is very similar to shale oil. So coal and gas to liquids, this is a slightly different kind of unconventional fossil fuel because it's taking what you've already got, coal and gas, and you're turning it into a liquid fuel. So that's partly because all of our transport infrastructure is based on oil, and so as oil runs out, we've got loads of coal left. It's kind of makes economic sense to make a liquid fuel from coal. And the problem with it is the whole process takes a huge amount of energy again, and lots of water pollution. So that's mainly in South Africa at the moment. It's partly because when there was a oil embargo on South Africa during apartheid, they started to develop their own liquid fuels from coal instead. It was also used in the World War, interestingly as well, because the Germans couldn't make oil, so they started to make liquid fuels from coal. But it's, again, a really bad idea, and we shouldn't be doing it. Okay, so this one is a slightly more exotic one. It's called methane hydrates. It's got this little methane molecule, and it's surrounded by water, and it's in this sort of icy, slushy type substance. And there's enormous amounts of it around the world. It's found in the tundra in the Arctic, but mostly on the continental shelf of the oceans. It's not being extracted on a commercial scale, but there has been a recent successful experimental project in Japan. The thing is with methane hydrates is that there is probably as much carbon in methane hydrates as all of the rest of the fossil fuels in the world combined. So all the rest of the coal and whatever, there's an enormous amount. But lots of it's in very small amounts spread over the sea, so you probably couldn't extract it. It also seems like methane hydrates play a very important role in maintaining the stability of the seabed, and that if you start extracting it, it might lead to sudden collapses of the seabed, which might lead to a tsunami. So that's not a good idea. There was, in about 9,000 years ago on the coast of Norway, there was a rapid, well, there's different theories about it, but some people think there was a rapid release of methane hydrates, which then led to I think it's like a 30-metre tidal wave which covered half of Scotland. So yeah, you don't really want to mess around with the stability of the seabed. It's quite important. That's the ship that they used to start drilling it in Japan. So this is the final one. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. And it's just to say that some of what defines unconventional is the more extreme environments you move into. So included in that is the Arctic and deep water stuff. So again, it's got lots of the similar kinds of problems with increased energy consumption. This is the Kuluk drilling rig. It's actually really ancient drilling rig they redesigned to use in the Arctic. And so Shell, one of the main companies trying to develop Arctic oil, was saying, oh yeah, it's all going to be fine. And then this thing ran aground and completely screwed up their operation last year, which is brilliant. Delayed Arctic drilling for about a year. But it's just a demonstration of like these really extreme environments that they're trying to move into, because we're getting pushed into it because of our increased energy consumption. And they really can't deal with it. They massively overestimate their ability to operate in those environments, as the Deepwater Horizon demonstrated. So this was, again, we've used up all the nice shallow bits of oil, so we're getting to deeper and deeper examples. And this was one where they said it was all fine, and then 11 people died in the explosion, and there was one of the biggest oil spills in history. Yeah. So, actually, maybe. Actually, yeah, we've got 10 minutes left, so I better get through this quickly. So this is the final point I want to talk about, is the resistance to unconventional fossil fuel extraction around the world. And this is one of the positive things about this new sort of development, these different types of energy sources, is that they're creating a huge opposition to them. And that's partly because they're, as I was saying, they're more spread out over wider areas, so they're impacting local populations more, and people are starting to fight back against it. And in some cases, very powerfully and very successfully. So this is the tar sands, which has been the native peoples in Canada refer to themselves as the First Nations. So there's a very strong First Nations-led movement against tar sands. And the Keystone XL pipeline. This is a pipeline